So this is 20 minutes past 7 in the morning of Wednesday, the 12th of August 2020. An exception in the Times today on the front page, where they're running this piece and they're apparently quoting the statement made by the migrants: "We will drown if you stop us," migrants warn Britain. Now, they will drown in many ways under the onslaught mounted by Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, the Interior Minister, carrying the agenda of racist violations and scaremongering the whole population into believing that 8 or 9 people trying to cross the channel in a dinghy constitute a greater threat than the threat posed by the pandemic, which is still very much active and is threatening the safety of so many people in this country, thousands of people in this country. The pandemic that was defied by Dominic Cummings in May. And even the Sunday Times, the sister paper of the Times of today, ran the story under the headline that the normal rules do not apply to him. So he is above the law, as is Boris Johnson and most of his propagandists who are now engaged in demonizing migrants. Like this appears to be a mom and her child. And this is Nikki Karimi, a lawyer, and her daughter Saba have spent 10 days living in a tent in Calais, in France. She said that she would kill herself if they were not allowed on a boat. Now, what would make a young person, a lawyer, say that? What would make her say that? She must be at the end of her tethers. And this is the most grotesque violation of human rights that is guaranteed by the various charters and various declarations the UK is still a signatory to, and especially in violation of the Refugee Convention or Agreement of 1951. And this is the tip of the iceberg. If the mother, who is a lawyer, is threatening to kill herself, then it does not need extra explanation and clarification as to what Boris Johnson is doing as he breaches the law and the legal duties the UK remains under to protect these people. So there is the border force treating the victims of famine, war, hunger, starvation, dislocation. The border force is treating them as an invading army. Ordinary words have lost the ordinary sense and ordinary meanings. And the country is actually facing real economic problems, as the Times says. And it's not the Times only, it is all the objective or nearly objective observers of the British economy. What I said earlier, not today, but at the beginning of these broadcasts on the Khoodeelaar channel. And we have been saying, even before we started this channel, that the pandemic has exposed Boris Johnson fronted regime as being in a perennial state of pandemonium. And that actually belies the relentless promotion of Boris Johnson as the vote winner by the BBC and by others who have promoted him to get to the post at number 10 Downing Street, and how costly that venture has been. Nearly 100,000 people have died mainly due to the negligence and deliberate policy of herd immunity. Herd immunity, for those who are not in Britain and watching this, is in brief a policy to withdraw care and support from people who are ill with the virus and let them die. And the idea behind that deadly killer policy is that the more people die, the stronger will be the resistance to the virus. It is not only illogical, stupid, and criminal, and constitutes crimes against humanity, but it is pathetic as an attempt at explaining such a grotesque, murderous policy on your own population. And the question is, why then isn't Johnson under pressure from the opposition? The official opposition, fronted now by a man who basks in the promotion that he's a forensic examiner and critic of the government. He is not. He's not proving to be any scrutineer of government, let alone a forensic critic. And what is happening with the papers today, we shall be coming to the details of the events going on in Calais, in Dover, and the role being played by the Kent County Council, which is a Tory-controlled, overwhelmingly Tory-controlled county council, which is acting as the front line in the propaganda war against the migrants. And again, the Kent County Council's leader is violating the obligations that Britain is under, according to British signature status to the Refugee Convention, which the United Nations Refugee or Human Rights Agency is obviously emphasizing and stressing. And there is a piece in the paper, I'll come to that in a minute, about yes, this is the Belarus that the Times had a leading article on yesterday. And they're continuing the Belarus commentary. And before that, we shall be talking about this economic crisis that the British, quote, economy faces. Commerce in crisis. The Chancellor should resist calls to extend the furlough scheme and instead help business and workers adapt to new conditions. Now, the Times, controlled by Rupert Murdoch, is of course against helping society by the Treasury, by the state, and it wants the whatever limited furlough scheme or relief to the hardest hit the current finance minister had begun. They are saying that he should stop them. And they're saying that they should come to terms with the deteriorating conditions at every level because of the virus and the pandemonium government. And there is this unbelievable piece written by a man called Roger Boyce. Now, Roger Boyce in the Times is one of those people who can be safely, on the basis of the contents of his column, called a resident, an inhabitant in the darkest of the dark hole. He is backward, unenlightened, and is forever crying to go back to the dark ages. So he's saying that Britain can lead fight against corrupt regimes. Now, how dare he? Of course, corrupt regimes need to be fought. But this is a time when Britain is being completely abused and exploited by the most corrupt regime that has been found in the records of the last 400 years of British government. So Roger Boyce is stupid. He is more stupid than Boris Johnson when Boris Johnson called the migrants traffickers stupid, because the actual target is not the traffickers. The actual targets in the propaganda is the migrants, collectively the migrants. So the corrupt Times are corruptly edited and corruptly published and corruptly scripted. Times newspaper is talking about ending corruption by Britain at a time when the British government is the most corrupt that has been seen in recorded or known history, at least for the last 400 years. So the Times, as usual, has got all kinds of contradictory things in it. There is this guest writer called Martha Gill. Now, Martha Gill is the daughter of Amber Rudd, and Gill is the name of the father, who was a Scottish, overhyped food writer, A. Gill. Now, Amber Rudd is the Home Secretary or the Interior Minister who was imposed in October 2018, when she issued the statement condemning the then visiting Britain, that is, rapporteur on poverty and extreme poverty and housing, I suppose. And this man is called, he's an Australian, professor of law at the New York University. Because he's white, he was given that post, not because he knew about poverty or hunger or how poverty is created and maintained in the Western so-called democracies. I have written extensively about Philip Alston's ignorance and stupidity and lack of connection with the reality of the behavior of the various decision-making processes across the Western countries, especially in Britain, that causes housing problem, homelessness, and extreme poverty. Philip Alston, of course, doesn't have anything to say in substantiating any pretend response to my critique. So he hasn't answered. But he will be held to account, because I haven't even properly started on him, because he has been given the highest possible profile on that brief. And he failed to answer Amber Rudd, who flatly denied the very moderate and very modestly put statement he had made at a preliminary news conference at the end of his so-called fact-finding visit of Britain in October 2018. In October 2018, on the 12th of October 2018, Philip Alston also was the main speaker at an event held in the Barking Road in Kennington in the East London borough of Newham, where the elected mayor, already in post since May of that year, Roxana Fayaz. Roxana Fayaz is of Pakistani origin, and she has actually told tales of her encounters with homelessness and housing problems, etc., etc., in the run-up to the selection of her as the Labour Party's candidate for mayor in Newham to replace Robin Wales. So when Philip Alston attended that meeting in the Barking Road in Canning Town in Newham on the 12th of October 2018, among the audience, of course, was Roxana Fayaz. Also among the audience was a mother who had been cruelly treated by Newham Council. And so that mother made a statement at that meeting, which was organized by a community organization, Community Links, which is, of course, supportive of the Newham Council, and Newham Council reciprocates the support, but still, it wasn't a meeting organized by Newham Council itself, because that would be too much of a giveaway. So they organized that meeting with Philip Alston via that organization. And at that meeting, the mother told how cruelly she was treated by Newham Council's employees in post. So outrageous was the behavior of Newham Council's cruel employees, according to the statement made by the mother at that meeting in front of Philip Alston, the UN man envoy on homelessness or housing rights and extreme poverty, that Fayaz, only 3 months in her place at that time, May, June, July, August, September, October, 4 months, she was forced to stand up and stage, I repeat, stage an apology for the behavior of the Newham Council employee concerned. Now, as we began the reporting, exclusive investigative reporting on the behavior of Newham Council, the corrupt council, we shall be covering this incident in extensive detail in due course. But suffice to say that although she staged that apology on behalf of the cruel and corrupt and unfit and lacking in compassion employee of Newham Council, Roxana Fayaz herself never stopped any of these similar incidents occurring. And when we continue next on Newham Council's corruption and corrupt regime, an unlawful and cruel regime fronted by Roxana Fayaz, we shall be detailing item by item just how cruel and dishonest Roxana Fayaz is and has been against the evidence of other corrupt, criminal, lying behavior perpetrated by employees in fully paid posts in Newham Council. Now, that is actually typical. That is typical of the lack of honesty and lack of transparency, lack of accountability, lack of integrity in the behavior of local councils. So when Roger Boyce says that Britain can play its part and get rid of corrupt regimes, he is not only in calculate, he is intentionally being corrupt and criminal, and he needs prosecuting. And there is this, going back to Martha Gill, the daughter of Amber Rudd. So Amber Rudd issued a statement at the end of the preliminary statement, the first statement that Philip Alston issued at the end of his so-called fact-finding tour of Britain. And Amber Rudd made the statement speaking with contempt in the tone of her voice, contempt and denial in the contents of her statement. And she accused Philip Alston of being misleading and unrepresentative of the evidence. Now, Amber Rudd, of course, was supposedly a remainder in the Brexit thing. So when she was in post in the government of Theresa May, who was also supposedly a Remainer. But these people who have claimed to have voted or supported to remain in the EU and have thus implied that they recognize the values of an organization or a bloc like the EU that makes the English law, the British law, or the legal system liberal, humanitarian, and kind of fit for the time and fit for the duties the British state owes to its members of the public and the citizens. But their actual behavior in office, their roles are completely, absolutely the opposite of what they claim to be. So Amber Rudd is actually as racist and as much in denial of the poor people's rights, of human rights, as she would be if she were a Brexiteering, brazen Little Englander, which she denies being. But her behavior, and when she contemptuously dismissed the very moderate findings of Philip Alston, she came across, in effect, as Esther McBee, who was the person in post that she replaced after Theresa May brought her back in after a few months outside, because Amber Rudd had lost her post as the Home Secretary or the Interior Minister after being caught lying about the evidence inside the Home Office of racism and the behavior of the Home Office and the policies of the Home Office against the people, mainly from the Caribbean. And it is known as the Windrush generation and the betrayal of the Windrush people. And she made a significantly on the record denial, which was untrue and dishonest, and it reflected her incompetence. Whatever it was, Amber Rudd was not telling the truth for whatever reason. And so she was embroiled in a instant demand for her second. So she resigned as the Home Secretary. And she stayed resigned for several months until Esther McBee, who was in post as the Secretary of State for the Department of Deprivation, Want and Hunger, otherwise known as the Department for Work and Pensions, she became so untenable in that post, Esther McBee, that she had to resign because she was caught lying to the accountant, the Public Accounts Committee's accountant caught her lying and published the various exchanges between them, which showed that Esther McBee was lying or not telling the truth. And despite the best efforts of her fellow right-winger and fellow racist, Frank Field, who was MP in the name of the Labour Party, for a seat on Merseyside, Liverpool, Esther McBee was forced to resign, and she was replaced by Amber Rudd on the very day that Esther McBee was forced to resign in October 2018. And Amber Rudd's first public statement as the new Secretary of State in the Department for Want and Hunger and Poverty was against the United Nations Special Envoy on extreme poverty and homelessness or housing. Now, her daughter, Martha Gill, has been one of her cheerleaders, understandably. And because she is the daughter of a Home Secretary and of A. Gill, who was one of the most highly promoted, quote, journalists in Free State in the last 100 years. So Martha Gill has got a subsidiary kind of claim to a kind of being a journalist or being an opinion former opinion maker. She is now writing that the British theft of the artifacts from places they colonized, this grip is loosening. So she's coming across as a kind of anti-colonialist. Far from it. She is doing a tactical piece, appearing to be against colonialism, but not opposing racism, not opposing hardship, not opposing cruelty, not opposing any of those things. And the evidence that she is not any of those things that she should be, if she were to be taken seriously about colonialism, she would have been opposed to homelessness and all the other things that are being created, hunger being created by government policy, local government policy and central government policy, but she hasn't been. So that is Amber Rudd's daughter Martha Gill in the Times doing a guest column because Alice Thompson is away this week or this fortnight. And that is neither here nor there because they are all representing, pandering to the same agenda, same narrative. They may appear to be differing from one another, but that's only slightly. It's a presentation, it's a decoration. Now, on the front page of the Times today is a piece about Kamala Harris, because she is being described as the black woman, as the first black woman in history to be picked up as a running mate in America. Now, I don't want to go on about Kamala Harris because I don't think that she is against racism or against the corruption in the American system in the way that she needs to be, should be, if the hype about her that has started this with the picking by Biden of her as the running mate is to be justified in any way. Kamala Harris will turn out to be another Barack Obama type of figure. Barack Obama was overhyped and he did not deliver. So Kamala Harris will not be delivering, but she is overhyped. Now, on the front page of the Daily Mail today, remember what we are doing. We are heading for the Kent County Council. This is the introduction to that exclusive, latest, final part of our report about Kent County Council playing the role of the frontline army against the vulnerable people, many of them risking their lives to cross the channel. Now, this is the piece about Stephen Lawrence. Stephen Lawrence was murdered by racists in southeast London, in Lewisham, in April 1993. And that is 93, that is 27 years. 27 years later, his murderers have not been caught or prosecuted for his murder. Now, this is very important because when Shamima Begum got a procedural, as we said from the beginning, it was a procedural thing. It wasn't the last word, but she was given a procedural allowance to appeal against her citizenship being taken away from her. Boris Johnson said that he would scrap altogether the legal aid system that allowed her to be given that procedural win against the governments withdrawing her citizenship. Now that suggests that Boris Johnson is not only stupid, but he is criminally in denial of basic facts. And that nobody in Fleet Street, nobody in the mainstream media, including the BBC, has got the guts or the audacity or the imagination, or in other words, the plain dutifulness, duty to tell the truth about Boris Johnson being completely unfit for that post. Now, there is a woman called Fleet Street Fox. Now, Fleet Street Fox is a columnist, and she is currently and has been for some years attached to the Daily Mirror. I mean, she has got her own racism and backwardness and ignorance. But I'm referring to her in context of Boris Johnson and why nobody is pointing out his unfitness. It's Fleet Street Fox who wrote several columns or several pieces predicting that Boris Johnson, if he got into number 10 Downing Street, would prove to be such a disaster that he would be out very soon. Now, she is right on his being a disaster, but she got it, of course, wrong because she predicted that he would be out, and her predictions were written most of them before the 12th of December 2019 election. So she was not, I don't think she was aware of the possibility that Jeremy Corbyn would hand Boris Johnson the kind of victory that Boris Johnson managed to get, 80 plus majority in the House of Commons. So that is what is keeping Boris Johnson in place. So had there been no majority like that, Boris Johnson would be out by now. So Fleet Street Fox would have been correct by now already, but she has been proven partly correct because he is a disaster. But the other part of her prediction, her fact-based, evidential, contextual kind of prediction, as at the time she wrote them, has been yet to be vindicated. But the essential lesson is that he is unfit for delivering the government the protection, the safety, and security that this country needs. And that includes his totally immature and ignorant threat to scrap the legal aid because Shamima Begum got a small procedural step in her battle to get her citizenship back. Every time there is a defeat in the courts by the government, and these defeats are staged defeats because they don't last as long as they should. All the defeats the government suffered and all the defeats that the right-wing cabal and the Tories fronted by Boris Johnson while Theresa May was still in place and they were engaged in the coup to get rid of her, all the reversals that Boris Johnson suffered in the Supreme Court and his line and alliance suffered in the Supreme Court have been completely done away with. So the people who over-celebrated or overly celebrated the victory of Jinnah Millah in the Supreme Court rulings were ignorant about the legal system in this country as well as the overall constitution of this country. And I'm saying to all of them that do not be stupid. Because if you want credibility, the first thing you need to do is to know your facts. There is no record. There is absolutely no record of Britain being dominated politically by forces that are reliably active for democracy. The people who have been in power or the people who have been actually controlling the agenda of the various, quote, political movements in Britain have been of the right-wing persuasion, of the anti-democratic tendencies. And it includes the Labour Party. It includes the entirety of the Labour Party, despite the locally excited and exaggerated slogans that they are not. For example, Chris Williamson, Ken Livingstone, George Galloway, Tony Benn, and of course Jeremy Corbyn. These are some of the names in the last 30 years that the British Parliament has had as MPs, and all these people have been called serious revolutionary socialists and morally so. Now, I say both those claims are absolutely unsubstantiated by the evidence of their behavior and their roles. We shall be continuing in the next part. This part is ending at 6 minutes to 8 in the morning of Wednesday, the 12th of August, 2020.